Welcome back to another episode of Living Lifted with Brenton Ross. So what we're actually going to be doing is like what we did with the election episode. We're going to pause from the podcast briefly, and I'm going to talk to you today about how to make 2025 your best year so far. Now, I actually have this note further down, but I'm actually going to say it right now. I'm not going to try to tell you what to do or going to try to fit you into a box that's going to make you happy. Everyone's different. I don't know what's going to make you happy. That's like me trying to define success for you. Only you can define that. That's up to you. I'm just going to encourage you to take the time and have the self-awareness to figure out if you're stuck in a box of unhappiness or feeling frozen and how that box was built. Because it didn't happen overnight. It happened as a result of a series of decisions or even indecisions. So that being said, I just want to get that out of the way, that I'm not coming on here as some self-proclaimed expert that this is what you need to do or not do to have the happiest, best year. Because we'll get into this even more. I'm about to go rogue here, and I'm not going to let myself do it because I spent way too much time on these notes to go rogue, so I'm not doing it. I can't control, you can't control what happens this year. We can take the self-inventory, we can put an amazing plan in place, but we don't know what's going to happen over the next year, the next day, or the next few hours. So we're going to do our part, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. Now, to be transparent with you, when I make a video like this, whether it's right now or over the years past, I kind of take on this self-pressure, this self-imposed pressure of, I've got to just nail this and get this perfect for you. And whether that's because I want to help you or I think, oh, this video is going to really take off and I've got to just get it just right. I'm going to take that pressure off right now and just say this. These are just my thoughts. These are things that I'm wanting to share with you that I'm working on for myself. These are methods I've used that have helped me. I'm still a work in progress and always will be. And hopefully there's something I talk about here today that helps you in some way to step into becoming the person you know you were created and designed to be. And no matter what happens in 2025, you will be the person that's prepared and ready to make the most of it. Okay? So, start out here by saying if you want to make 2025 your best year yet, first we need to take honest self-inventory of our thoughts, decisions, actions, inactions, influences, major life events, and the results they produced in 2024. Every new year, we nonstop hear about New Year's resolutions. And that's great, but if we're honest, those resolutions for most people have the reputation of being short-lived. Maybe they last the first few weeks or even the first few months of the year, but often they eventually fall flat. And I believe that's because in order to devise a successful plan forward, we must first understand how we got to where we are now. It's nice for all this wishful thinking in these New Year's resolutions to just, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to be this, or I'm going to quit this habit. But we need to understand how we got to where we are so that way we can figure out how to go where we want to go. And if you don't like how your 2024 went, you have to be able to ask yourself and answer honestly, how much are the results of this year my responsibility? As I said at the beginning, there are things that happen in our lives that we cannot control. But our decisions, the way we react to the things that happen in our place, are things that we can control. And we need to be able to get to the point that we stop blaming the world and everyone else for our problems and take responsibility for the things that we actually can control, the things that we can do or change. I could have broken these down into dozens of categories, but decided to just break them down into 3 main topics or sections. What I mean by I could have broken these down into tons of categories, depending on your life situations. If we sat across from the table from each other, I would love that opportunity. But to hear your story, your traumas, your victories, major life events, what you struggle with, what your strengths are, then we could really break them down in tons of little subcategories. But since I don't get to do that with you today, I'm going to just keep it into 3 main topics. And that's why I'm also not going to try to tell you what to do, because without understanding your perspective, how you've gotten to where you are today, what decisions you've made, what decisions you haven't made, I don't think it's appropriate for me to tell you what to do. And even if we were sitting here, I wouldn't try to tell you what to do from a place of I know best. I would just sit in it with you and listen because I care, and then we would work through it together. I believe empathy in these scenarios is extremely important. All right, so those 3 topics or sections is mind, body, and spirit. So let's start with your mind. And I'm gonna ask you questions or just bring up subjects or topics that I want you to think about and what it looks like in your life. So to start, for example, self-talk, your internal dialogue. What does yours look like? Are you negative? Constantly beating yourself up? Constantly telling yourself you're going to fail again? Or you're going to be abandoned? Or you're not good enough? Or you're unlucky? Or are you building yourself up? Not even from a place of arrogance, but from a place of self-love. The difference between self-love, where we hear a lot of this today, love yourself just means let yourself have anything you want when you have it, when you want it because it feels good. That's self-indulgence. Self-love to me looks more like self-discipline. And it's taking all things into account, all things into consideration, and making a healthy, mature decision for yourself. Is this in my best interest? And so that applies here to your internal dialogue. What are you telling yourself? Not just even on a daily basis, but from a moment to moment basis. A lot of us, we wake up first thing in the morning and that internal dialogue already kicks on. And it's either positive or it's negative. It's full of truths, it's full of lies, it's full of positive memories, negative memories, traumas. What type of dialogue are you living out of? Because it is going to affect the way you think, even to how you act and how you feel. That is so important, to take control of every thought, take every thought captive. So what do you feed your mind? Because you might say, Brenton, yeah, that sounds great, but how do I change? I don't want to be building myself up all the time with just like all this almost fake self-positivity. So these are the things that I look at for myself to try to influence that voice in my mind, to feed it with promises, to feed it with positivity. Because if you want to think positive, but you're feeding yourself with negative content and negative external sources, it's going to be really hard to change from a negative dialogue to a positive dialogue if you're still feeding yourself negativity. So for example, what do you feed your mind? What kind of music do you listen to? What kind of content do you consume? What does your screen time look like? Do you just doom scroll? I love that phrase or that term they've came up with for that. You're just going through your TikTok or your Reels or shorts or whatever, and at first you might think, oh, that's not that big a deal. That's not going to be, that negative on my mind, but it is. You start comparing yourself to the other people that you see. You're watching a lot of things that are going on in the world that aren't necessarily all positive. So be intentional about that. Filter what you look at, what you listen to. For example, for me, I love music and I've always liked hip hop. I love all music, but I've always loved hip hop since I was a kid. And I realized that a lot of the lyrics that I listened to, a lot of them were not all hip hop, but a lot of the ones I was listening to and choosing to listen to were very dark. They were very negative. They were very angry. They were very materialistic. They were very diminishing against other people. I had to really take a step back and say, yeah, I really enjoy this music, but is the words that I'm feeding my mind on a consistent basis what I want to be feeding myself when I'm wanting to change the way my mind works, the way I think? And when I was honest with myself, I had to really cut back on a lot of that. I can still work out to it in certain scenarios with my friends, but just listening to the same lyrics over and over, like in my truck or something like that, I realized that it's not good for me. Do you spend time outside? Do you spend your time with good people who build you up, who are positive, or are you around negative people? Who do you listen to when you go to someone for advice? It's great that you're seeking advice, but seeking advice could end up being something that's detrimental if you're seeking advice from the wrong people. This is a big one. Alone time. Can you even be alone? A lot of us today can't. We go right to a device because it's more comfortable than being alone in our own thoughts. If that internal dialogue that's negative and attacking us all the time is still there even when we're distracted, imagine how loud it gets. I don't have to tell you, imagine. You know how loud it gets when you're alone. And that's why you don't like it. That's why it's uncomfortable, because those negative voices get even louder. So what I've learned for myself, the only way that those negative voices, those lies, the anxiety-producing thoughts get quieter is if I start feeding my mind with promises, with truths, with positive things, so that way the truth and the promises are louder than the lies. It doesn't work for me. I don't know how it would work for you. It might, but for most people, I don't understand how, unless you replace the negative with something positive and all you're trying to do is just not think on the negative, you're still thinking about it. You're like, don't think of that, don't think of that, don't think of that. Well, what are you doing? It's like trying to quit an addiction. You're still thinking of it. So the only way to stop thinking of the negative is to replace it with a positive. Take the power away from the negative and give it to the positive. Okay? And again, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just telling you what's worked for me. And I feel like I'm already butchering this, but we'll keep going. Next, body. So I put the body strategically right after the mind because I believe that the body follows the mind. If I'm teaching this, like for example, of someone that I'm working out with or something, your mind will give up and quit before the body actually is at true failure. It's like, I use this expression with some people. If I'm taking someone through a really, really difficult workout and they're doing it with me, or I'm training them, whatever, and it's really burning, it's painful, like a good burn, not the bad pain like you're getting injured, like the good muscle burn, like we're really getting into this muscle. It's like taking your hand and putting it on the stove and your brain's like, hey, this is really hot. You need to take your hand off this, it's burning you. And you're basically telling your brain, yeah, I'm just gonna leave my hand there and I'm gonna keep hitting more reps. So you're training your mind to not quit and give up when you're going through something difficult, when you know you're capable of more. So the body follows the mind. So let's hit on some of the topics here, and I'll try not to get crazy fitness focused here, but it's all relative and it's what we're talking about. And especially when it comes to New Year's resolutions, almost all of them are around an addiction or fitness. And I would love the opportunity for a decent amount of people to listen to this or watch this, so that way they could frame a proper mindset when it comes to their health and fitness resolutions. So starting with sleep, do you have a routine? Or are you, and I'll give you props. Like if you're in the phase of life where you've got young kids, I'm going through that right now, and sleep is a rarity. You know, if you're in charge of having to take care of a baby that's crying throughout the night, like you don't get the luxury of having a routine and an uninterrupted routine. Let's put it that way. So you're gonna do the best you can. And that's why I can't make this perfect or fit for everybody. You couldn't make it perfect even for myself, but you know what I'm trying to say. If you can control your sleep routine, try to figure out how to get yourself, they say 7-8 hours, and that's usually what I try to do. But even leading up to you going to bed, what you're watching, what you're listening to, the type of setting that you're in, the type of conversations that you're in. So you let your mind start to calm down and relax. Your nutrition, whole foods, not the grocery store. Whole foods as in non-processed, non-packed, like real whole foods is something that I've really been focusing on. When I first started out in my fitness journey, I was so hyper-focused on trying to produce a certain result in the mirror that I was doing a lot of processed stuff, like zero sugar, just crap. And even though it produced the shredded physique I wanted to see, it wasn't a healthy way of doing it. So I started over. I was like, I've got to figure out how to, produce the result I want to see in the mirror. But more importantly, I need to do it by eating healthy, by eating whole foods. And so eating lean protein sources and vegetables and fruit and anything that actually grows from the earth and it's not something that's a processed food is what I've focused on and learned how to do it this way. And it has helped me tremendously with my immune system, with my overall health, with like focusing on longevity. I want to be able to do this forever. And in order to do that, I need to eat the right way. So I started cutting out processed sugars and a lot of sodas and all that kind of stuff. Certain chemicals. I'm not perfect. I still have certain things. I'll enjoy a zero calorie, zero sugar, Coke Zero or something like that. I know they're still not healthy, but it's not like I'm saying you can't ever have anything you enjoy. Just be conscious of it, because if you're constantly always allowing yourself to have, whether you call it a cheat or things that you shouldn't, that's going to build over time, and then you're going to find yourself in a place you don't want to be. So we need to be self-disciplined while still giving ourselves grace. Focusing on your water intake. That's something that was an acquired thing for me. I had to teach myself. I drink at least a gallon of water every single day now, but I used to not drink any water at all. I would just say, hey, there's water and juice and beer, and I'm getting plenty of it. So that was not good. Making sure I get plenty of water has been so important and been a game changer for me. Actually taking your food into consideration of what it does to even your hormones or your emotions, because it affects more than just what you see in the mirror. It affects your body, it affects your mind, it affects your hormones. Exercise. You don't have to be a bodybuilder or a power lifter or a CrossFitter, but you need to get your body moving. Being stagnant is so hard on the body. That sounds backward, doesn't it? You would think just sitting in this chair all the time would be like the most restful, healthy, peaceful thing for my body, but it's not. It is the opposite. You being stagnant all the time leads to your body deteriorating. It leads to joint pain. It leads to muscle pain. It leads to the atrophy of the muscles. We have to get ourselves moving. So if you're new to this, if you've been stagnant, if you've been on the couch, if you're severely overweight, or you're just blessed with the fact that you're not severely overweight or obese, but you've been stagnant, you have a metabolism that's blessed you, you still need to get yourself moving, and just start with walking. Just go for a walk. That's going to even tie into what I started with the mental. Like going for a walk, especially outdoors, getting that sunlight, it affects you so much mentally. It's not only benefiting your body, it's also benefiting your mind. And now I'm going to call myself out here right now. Stretch. I am bad about stretching. I'm better than I used to be, but I need to be better. I get so tight all the time from my training and not stretching that I pay for it by being in pain constantly. And then once I get to the pain to the point where I'm just so miserable I can barely sleep, then I'll go get worked on and I'll start stretching and it gets better. And then I go right back into that stupid routine of not stretching again and find myself in pain. And it's been a repetitive process. And this is an example of taking responsibility for what I can control. And actually being honest with myself and saying, Brenton, you're bad about stretching. And that's why you're in pain and you need to be better about it. So I actually made a note in here. I'm going to add this to my daily self-inventory sheet. I'll talk a little bit more about that, what that is later on, but that's something that I'm going to now be taking self-inventory on a daily basis, tracking my activity and holding myself accountable, because I do need to stretch more. It's something that I teach a lot of my clients, but I'm not going to go through chapter and verse here right now because it just would take too long. But basically I create a spreadsheet that tracks all of my daily activity. It allows me to see what my results are that produce, like, for example, if I track what I do on a daily basis, I can then at the end of the month see what that daily activity over a month sample set produces. It then allows me to tweak my daily activity to then manipulate what result I want to get out of from that month. And it's a constant work in progress. I've been doing it for over a year. I absolutely love this system. It's helped myself tremendously and a lot of the people that I've worked with, that I've taught this to. It's just an awesome way to constantly being able to tweak what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis to get me closer to my goals, to get me closer to being the man that I want to be. And I fall in love with the process. I love it. It's something I'll always do. Let's talk about spirit. For me, it's the most important because it's the foundation of everything, even my mental and physical. It's what it's rooted in and built on. I did save it for last on purpose because I figured if I started with it, a bunch of you have already clicked out of the video. I'm not going to preach at you. I'm just going to talk to you about how this has helped me and how it affects everything else that I've been talking about. Me focusing on my faith, if you want to call it your spiritual journey, however you want to categorize that, it's the only way that I've been able to break what I call, or what a lot of other people call, the performance cycle. Meaning, I get so focused on the physical and mental that it then actually can produce stress in my life, because I feel like if I'm not just nailing it, if I'm not hitting my metrics, if I'm not seeing measurable progress, then I'm failing. And the truth is I'm not failing. I'm just so hard on myself mentally that I'll start to feel like unless I'm basically perfect, then I'm not enough. And what my walk with God has done for me is that it has anchored my identity in Christ and who God says I am. I can live in freedom as I do the work to improve myself, not out of guilt or stress or pressure or comparison anymore, but out of love for God and others to be the best, healthiest version of myself to love them well. So it's completely taking everything that I've said and putting it in its proper place, its proper perspective of this is why I'm doing these things. And this is why I can give myself grace as I'm doing these things, because I am never going to be perfect. I'm accepting that. And I also can accept and live with myself as a work in progress and still be at peace with myself, still be at peace with how I fit into a crowd in a room or alone in my thoughts. The only way that I've been able to do that is through my walk with God, because self-development is not selfish if our motive is to be better for, not than, to be better for others. My goal in constantly tweaking my daily activity or working on my mental or working on my physical in the ways that I've addressed here is not so that I can be the best version of myself for the sake of being better than others or obtaining worldly success or taking things from others so it's now mine. I'm doing these things. I used to do it that way. I'll be honest with you right now. I used to do it that way because it was a way to protect myself. But the way that I do it now, my motive for doing it now is so that way I can be the man that I know God created me to be, not just for myself and for him, but also like when Jesus talks about the greatest commitment is to love your God, your Father with all your heart. And the second one is to love your neighbor. You loving others well is a way of loving God. So the better man that I can develop myself into to love my family, to love my friends, to love even strangers that I interact with. When I make a video like this, that I can actually allow God's love and his way of doing things that leads to a life of peace, that leads to a life of fulfillment, that leads to a life of being able to be happy and content with yourself, is as my brokenness heals, allowing that to shine through me. And I get in the way of that when I let my pride take over. And so I'm trying to kill my pride as much as I possibly can as I develop myself for the right reasons. But here's the best part. God will love you and will help you all the way through this process. You don't have to get your shit together so that then God will love you. I've had so many friends, so many people, when we're having these kind of talks, tell me, like, I feel like I'm almost there. I'm making better decisions, or I'm not doing this habit or this sin as much anymore, or I'm starting to focus on the right things, and then I'm going to try this God thing. It's backwards. He loves you exactly the way you are right now. And he wants to help you lovingly and gracefully grow into the person he's created you to be. He doesn't even expect you to do it on your own. He wants to help you. We're the ones that get in the way of him helping us because our pride, our sense of not feeling like we're enough makes us feel like we've got to, through our works or even through our mental structure or our heart posture, that we're now capable or worthy of receiving his help. And a lot of that's been shaped by our life experiences, whether it was how your parents were or school or whatever environment that you've been in that has really impressed that upon you, that you feel you need to perform, like I talked about earlier, in order to be worthy of receiving someone's love or their help. But that's not how it works with God. No matter how much you've messed up, no matter how bad of things that you've done, no matter how many times you've failed, no matter how many times you've gone back to that addiction, He loves you just the same. He already loves you the way you are. And so we can receive that help so we don't have to go through this very difficult process. None of this is easy. I'm not even going to pretend for a second that any of this self-development work is easy, but we don't have to do it alone. We can receive His help. And what's really cool about this last category of spirit is that you can actually overinvest in the mind and body categories. I've done it. I will own that firsthand, that when I was using my physical, the way I look, the way I can perform, the way that I can make an impression on other people, the attention I would get, when I made that my hyper focus, I started to become very arrogant and shallow in where my focus was. And then you could say, well, how could you overinvest in the mental? Well, you can start to think that you've learned so much and you know so much that you're better or know more than others. And then it becomes a place of this arrogance or even narcissism that will get in the way of your ability to do what I said earlier, of just sitting in a scenario with somebody, sitting in their life, their perspective, and instead of judging them, to actually have empathy and understanding and walk through this together. So we don't want to allow our overinvestment in the physical or the mental to then lead to pride. And what I was saying that's so cool about the spiritual is that you can't overinvest in it. Now, I know where your mind's probably going. When I wrote this, my mind went there. Well, what about that over the top, super goody two-shoe spiritual person that's annoying as hell? They're not doing it for the right reasons, most likely. It's become a part of a identity that looks really good to a lot of people on the outside, but their heart might not be in the right place. Because if your relationship with God somehow is leading to arrogance, or that you're better than someone else, you don't have a proper relationship with God, because that's not what He teaches. He said the first will be last. Those who want to lead will first serve. So you will never see anybody as beneath you. Jesus never saw anybody as beneath Him. Even as He was being crucified, the people that were crucifying Him, He was praying for them. When He came and He spent time with people, He didn't spend time with the religious elites. He didn't spend time with the uber wealthy. He spent time with the sinners, with the prostitutes, with the tax collectors, with guys like me who are broken and really rough around the edges. And He came for the sick. So when you actually invest in your relationship with God and make it your focus, He will actually teach you how to have a sound mind. He will teach you how to have a healthy body, how to properly prioritize your life, how to manage your finances and your relationships. It's actually all right there in the Bible. It will teach you how to do those things. I have gone through a study Bible that has now taken me almost 3 years, where I'm ignorant enough that I needed somebody to explain to me what I was reading. I've read the Bible a bunch of times, but I'd never read it front to back, and I'd never read it in the version of a study Bible where instead of just skipping over something I didn't understand or just assuming I understood it, I actually took the time to have someone explain it to me. It has changed my life radically. How I view basically every single facet of my life, because before I kind of, to be honest, it might sound disrespectful, and I apologize if it offends any of you that are Christians, that I kind of looked at it as a book of like story tales, almost like a big Harry Potter book. And it wasn't until I read, and I believed that there was truth in it, but still so much of it just didn't make sense. So much of it almost seemed to contradict. But when I read it front to back, it stopped feeling that way, and it actually now started to present itself to me as a chronological, historical account that had no contradictions, that had so much wisdom, that had so many things that I could apply to my life, and it changed my life so much for the better. I said I wasn't going to preach, and I definitely just started preaching, so I'll leave it at that. But what I want to finish with is this. If you want your life to look a certain way, you have to be intentional about taking responsibility and holding yourself accountable to doing your part while remembering to give yourself grace. You've probably heard the old saying, we make plans and God laughs. The truth in that is we can't control everything. We can't control what tomorrow will bring. We can't even control what the rest of today will bring. But what we can control is what we do with the gift that we've been given. And that gift is the moment of right now, of today. If you woke up today, you already have something to be thankful for. And we all have far more than that to be thankful for. Gratitude is actually the powerful X factor in all of this. Gratitude is what allows us to frame our perspective of why we're doing what we do and keeping a good attitude as we do what we don't want to do. Because a lot of this is going to be full of things we don't necessarily want to do. Jesus talks about loving your neighbor or loving your family or those that love you. That's easy. Where's the reward in that? But what about when you have to love someone that hates you, that doesn't have the same political view as you, that treats you poorly, that lies about you? How are you still going to love someone like that? Or let's get back to just the non-spiritual side of this. When you've got to stop drinking, 7 beers every single night, or you've got to stop eating cupcakes and you love your cupcakes, or you've got to start going to the gym and you don't like going, or just going for walks and you don't want to do it and it sucks and it's hard at first. You got to wake up in the morning, start waking up at a time you didn't want to wake up with. Like Jocko Willink, however you say his name, he's got tons and tons and tons of content that it's like, what do you do when you don't want to wake up early? Well, you just do it. And what do you do to get over a breakup? You just do it. Like, you just get yourself to do it. But the part of that I believe is missing that gives you the power to do that is gratitude. Like, you need to have something that drives you, but what enables you to really keep your focus and your perspective in its proper place is gratitude. Thankful for the opportunity to use the gifts, the health, and the abilities that I've been given today to actually do something with them. You're not going to regret in life when you're on your deathbed and you think back about the things that you went for and you experienced and you got out of your comfort zone. I feel like the things that we'll regret is when we just stayed stagnant. We didn't experience life. We weren't present in the moment. We're not going to remember having our heads stuck in a device, but we'll remember that conversation we had when we went for a walk with someone and listened to their life story or something about them that we didn't know. When we challenged ourselves, even if we end up what the world would call failing in an endeavor, we still had the opportunity to learn. The emotions that we even experienced during that process, some of them sound negative, and they are, and they're difficult, whether it's, a setback or a frustration or anger or embarrassment, you're still alive. And you're still feeling things that you wouldn't get the opportunity to feel if you just stay in your little box. I've been in that box before. I've been frozen to the point that I was so bogged down by fear that I was stagnant. And getting out of that box was like almost getting a second chance at life. Face the things that I had been afraid of and realize that they should have never had the power over me that they had in the first place. Once we do something that we've been procrastinating or fearing, when we get to the other side of it, it is freedom. It is freedom. So I want us to remember as we prepare for 2025 to be thankful every step of the way. And that's a challenge, because that's a challenge that I have been really working on myself and will continue to do so through 2025 and probably the rest of my life. Learning to be grateful in all circumstances because I trust God and that His plan is good, even better than I could ever plan for myself. I was never really the person who was big into devotions or spending time with God. I would pray here and there, mostly when I needed things or I was afraid or to save me from some situation. But just the act of spending time for the sake of communing with God was not something I had ever really done much of, especially consistently. And when I first started doing it a few years ago, it felt like a chore. It did at first. But now It's something that I look forward to every single day because it's when I'm at the most at peace. And it has been so worth it. And the only way that I can even live up to the challenge I just presented you with here when I said learning to be grateful in all circumstances because I trust God and that his plan is good, even better than I could ever plan for myself, is I had to take the time to learn to get to know God so that I could trust him, especially with the things that I don't understand. If you've never watched any of my content before, my brother died of a drug overdose. And without getting too deep into it, because there's a lot of facets and layers as to why it was very difficult, it's something that I've never really been able to see like the purpose in. Like, oh, okay, I can see why that was a good thing. Still can't get there, still don't understand it. But the difference between now and when it happened over 10 years ago now is that even though I don't understand, I can get to the place of trusting God because I know him well enough now that even though he hasn't given me the answer or the reason as to why that took place, I know he's a good and loving father. And I can believe that it was for and a part of his perfect plan. And so whether it's a moment that culminates from making good diet decisions, where you then look in the mirror, you're in a family photo and you're not embarrassed of what you see anymore, or you haven't been able to get on the floor and play with your kids in a long time and now you're able to do so, or it's your mental exercises that you've been doing that you've been waking up anxious and depressed every single day for the last, as long as you can remember, and you're always like one breath away from catching your breath, you're just always anxious. And now you can breathe. You finally have peace. And it's all been worth it. This is how I feel about my walk with God. All the mornings, sometimes I'll be honest, it felt like it was just me going through the motions. And it took me really exercising and asking God for help to trust that what I was even doing was even worth it, that I wasn't just there buying into another self-coping mechanism, because at times it felt that way. And to really believe that the creator of the universe loves me and loves you more than I could ever imagine. Every moment, every minute, every morning that I've spent with him has been what has culminated to the point where now when I face the difficult things in life, that I can trust him through them. And that's how I can have peace and faith and assurance that 2025 will be a good year, because despite what happens in our world or politically or for me and my family financially or health-wise, I know that I have a good father and that I can trust him. And so can you. So I'm going to get way out of my comfort zone here. And to close this, I'm going to pray for you guys. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for each person that has listened to what I've had to say here. This is another one of those moments right now where I feel super vulnerable and almost like an idiot that I just blabbed for the last however long it's been. But God, I pray that something I said will resonate with someone who watched or listened, and it will give them the hope or the encouragement or that little push or positive reinforcement in the right direction to get them to start taking steps into being the person that you created them to be. God, I pray for each person here that's listening or watching, the families, the friends, the circles of influence, even the strangers past that they will cross over the next year. I pray for every single person that's represented. And God, that you will shine your face upon them, that you will shed your love on them, and to such an extent, God, that it will be something that they absorb and are able to shape their entire life perspective from a place of feeling loved, valued, not important as the world sees, but important because they know that they mean something to their Father. Lord God, that they will be able to heal and be able to focus on other people and loving others and serving others. Even as they take these steps of self-development, God, that their motive will shift from how does this make me the ultra successful, respected, person with accolades or status, and shifted into how do I become the person by following these steps that can provide real value and love and input in other people's lives in a way that I can serve them and be strong enough or healthy enough or mentally healthy enough to love these other people well, to love my family well. Lord God, I do pray for our world. I pray for our world over this next year that there will be such a peace, that there will be a love, that there will be this coming together of letting go of the things that I believe the enemy has used for thousands of years to divide us, that those things, Lord, will be quieted, that your truths and the love that we have for each other will be louder than the things that have been dividing us, and that it will allow us to unite, Father. God, I do pray for our country and each country that's represented by whoever's watching and listening, that the people that are in power, God, that they will stop those that are this way, that they will stop being self-serving, that they will stop being power hungry or greedy, and that it'll actually be about serving the people that have appointed them, that have put them in the position of power that they're in, that they won't lose sight of the fact of why they're doing it in the first place. And if their heart was to do it for themselves, that it'll change and they'll start doing for those that they represent. God, I pray for each person that's watching, listening to this, that you'll give them peace. If they have anxiety, that you will heal whatever is causing that anxiety, that you'll give them hope, that you will give them excitement for the year ahead, excitement for the path that following the right steps leads to, that it leads to freedom, that it leads to a healthy self-confidence, a healthy relationship with the people in their lives, God, that need them and depend on them and love them. Lord, I pray that you'll give us the boldness and the confidence that comes from you so that we can heal and grow and step into being the people you designed us to be. In your name, amen. I hope you guys have a great 2025.